We'll do it live. Fuck it. Do it live. I'll write it and we'll do it live. And thing sucks.
In 5, 4.
We'll do it live. Fuck it. Do it live. I'll write it and we'll do it live. And thing sucks.
In 5, 4, 3.
Citizens of the internet, welcome to another episode of the Polyticks Show. Those of you that are out there, thanks for sticking with me. I kind of debated last time I did a show. YouTube took it down, and I'm not going to debate their rationale. I think their rationale was probably okay. It's because I showed footage of the Ashley Babbitt thing on January 6th when she was shot by the Capitol police officer, and so that violates YouTube's policy on gun violence, and they took my stream down. They did not strike me, thankfully, so thank you. The YouTube gods were merciful in that regard. But then there's footage now everywhere of this Alex Preddy guy being shot, so it's, and as YouTube, I've seen people on their shows play that, so I don't know. I think sometimes YouTube just finds whatever reason they can to shut me off, and a lot of other people. I saw Nick Cruz from RBN the other day on Jimmy Dore talking about how RBN was down, and I was surprised. I haven't seen them in my feed in a while, so that explains it. And I think for me, I'm not on as much as I would like to be talking about this type of stuff, but it seems like every time I come back to do a stream, there's 1,000 new news items to discuss. And it got me thinking about a couple different things. The first is, who's responsible for Donald Trump, right? Because there's a lot of hand-wringing about it. And there's a lot of people that want to act like, everything was beautiful and flowers and roses until Trump came along and invented lying, right? That's kind of the vibe you get when you question people who are opposed to Trump. And so, I have never been a Trump guy, but I found myself over the last several years defending him, simply because I was a Bernie Sanders guy, and I saw how systematically and systemically opposed to any change whatsoever the establishment was, being someone who worked with Bernie Sanders. So I give Trump, I think, the benefit of the doubt on a lot of stuff for a couple reasons. One is because of the Bernie Sanders experience and the way that I saw the narratives being formulated against him and the way that people kind of push back against him. To give you an example, right? Bernie Sanders is a misogynist. Do you remember when that whole thing kind of broke? And he said Elizabeth Warren can't be president or something. It's not actually what he said, but that's how they framed it in the press because it was a smear. And so I started hearing all of my liberal friends who are otherwise, pretty intelligent people going like, oh, I don't know if I can vote for Bernie because he's such a violent misogynist. And he wrote something in a paper years ago. And it's like, I saw these ops being used internally in the Democratic Party to discredit the populist wing of the party. And then what happened, right? The Democrats told me and the populist wing of the party, the Bernie Sanders people, touch grass. We don't need you guys. We don't want you. We don't want anything to change. We want to keep putting up candidates like Obama who do Republican shit for our donors, but the liberal base likes because they're not white and or not straight. Pete Buttigieg, I think, was next in line. Look, guys, it's a gay guy. Yay! Listen, there's a lot of gay men I think would be great leaders, great presidents even. Pete Buttigieg is not one of them. But again, your whole argument gets reduced to this identity thing. And I fought so valiantly with my brunch liberal friends to explain the premise of this. And it's like, hey, if we're talking about politics, right? Talking about politics, all that matters is policy, politics, policy. What does this candidate stand for policy wise? And this was my big kind of split with the Democratic Party, because you saw the Rachel Maddows and the kind of like more liberal leaning people in the Hillary years go like, oh no, fuck Bernie Sanders. He's a white male, and we want a woman to do the same so we can continue the status quo while the country cheers for their PR victory, basically. And so there's no, person or entity outside of Donald Trump and his campaign themselves. And I mean, I think these people probably deserve even more credit than Donald Trump and his campaign, but because I think a lot of people voted for Trump or refrained from voting just because they didn't like the alternatives, right? And so there's no one that bears more of the blame for the rise and presidency of Donald Trump than the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party owns Donald Trump. They got him elected by telling the populist wing of their party, the Bernie people like me, to touch grass, get out of here. We don't want you. We'll pick up, Schumer said it himself, we'll pick up, a bunch more white collar, Republican leaning people in the suburbs by being more right wing and, succumbing to the will of our donors over the actual voters. And listen, I'm not arguing that the Republicans are any better either. I'm just explaining that the Democrats had many opportunities to elect someone that they could have kind of molded into a more likable, vessel for their donors. Someone like Bernie Sanders, who would have folded in a lot of ways to the donors if he had been elected. And then you have someone like Trump, who, love him or hate him, he's a very pig-headed guy, very, very single-minded, very confident. And I mean, listen, he has a good reason to be confident. The guy's been a millionaire most of his life, and now he's the fucking president of the United States. So what do you want? You might be cocky too if you were in those shoes. And so why am I going through all this? Why am I retreading a Democratic primary that happened, 5 years ago at this point, or even 9 years ago if you want to talk about the first one with Hillary? I'm bringing this up because I see patterns. And the pattern I'm seeing right now with these ICE protests and people being murdered by ICE is very similar to the pattern I saw with the Black Lives Matter thing and during COVID and all that, when it was very obvious to me that there are organized forces at work trying to foment, some kind of a revolution. You can't really call it a revolution, but like protests. And I went over this on my last stream, the Ice Baby, where I went through and I showed you. Go to Google right now and Google immigration NGO and just scroll through the pages and pages and pages of NGOs for immigration issues. And listen, I'm not even saying that they're all bad. But what I kind of see happening right now is this emotional manipulation, intense emotional manipulation, the same type of emotional manipulation that I mentioned in regards to Bernie Sanders, where it's like, oh, forget that this guy wants to give you health care and think about how he may or may not have said that a woman can't be president based on how you interpret this clip that leaked or whatever. Those kind of ops are what always get us. And I see that going on with Trump. Now, I'm not supporting ICE either. my position is always for the underdog. I'm always for the person. I'm against state power killing anyone, whether it's Ashley Babbitt or Renee Good, which we've talked about. Renee Good, very interesting name, right? Was the cop's name Jojo Bad or whatever? Like, it seems, a lot of this seems very suspiciously, symbolically manufactured to me. And that's my conspiracy theory corner for the day. Just kidding. Just kidding about that being for the day. Like, I've definitely got more roads to go down with you. So I say all this again. We're in a point right now where we have our fearless leader, Trump, here. The global chaos ensuing in his wake. It's kind of like every day there's a new explosion or fire or scandal. And I think that a lot of people kind of get caught up in these news cycles and this press narrative, even otherwise intelligent people, even people that I have a lot of respect for and love for, get caught up in these narratives, as I like to call it, the endless humming circus drone. That's from an old song with a band that I used to play with. We were a band called Jagged Thought Process, and we had an album called Appetite for Distraction, which was a play on Appetite for Destruction. And I wrote a lot of the lyrics during the lead up to the Iraq War because I saw this hypnotic repetition thing happening. And I see the same dynamic happening. And of course, no one in their right mind is going to look at ICE beating people and arresting them and go, yeah, I'm on their team. No one in their right mind. I notice I said, because there are plenty of people that are supporting that. But at the same token, you have to take a step back and look at things from, the bird's eye view, right? Because if you look around right now, if you watch news, if you social media is TV times 10 as far as propaganda goes, you get this idea that like we're barreling towards a civil war. We're barreling towards some kind of breaking point, war with Iran, war with Venezuela, war with this country, that country. Trump's trying to get Greenland. Everything's crazy. Who goddamn knows what's going on, right? And I like this Mark Twain quote. I was thinking about it today where he says, let me look it up so I don't butcher it. But it's something about when you're, I'm not going to, this is it. If you find yourself on the side of the majority, it is time to pause and reflect. I love that because I'm one of those people. There's another quote that I was reading to my son today from Bukowski, and it's something, and again, I'm going to be paraphrasing because I don't need to look this one up, but it's something to the effect of the problem with the world is that the dumbest people or the smartest people have doubts. The most intelligent people are doubtful and have doubts, and the dumbest people are full of confidence. And I mean, that applies on so many levels. I mean, you could apply that to Donald Trump himself. You could apply that to Trump's opposition, the liberal people who think that like anyone who voted for Trump or doesn't think Trump is the end of the world is a total terrorist, racist, whatever, and dummy. Where I've said this before, my take on a lot of the people I know that are MAGA was just that, look, we know Trump is a piece of shit, just like all of them, but he's not a Bush or a Clinton. And I have some kind of additional conversation around that thesis today, but I want to start today. We're going to go pretty deep into this because I think this guy has a lot of interesting things to say with an interview that I saw recently. And the guy's name is Alex Crane. And I think this is interesting for a couple reasons. First of all, this guy's not an American. So he doesn't have like any kind of emotional attachment to Trump or American politics, like directly. He might because of his bank account, because he is like a hedge fund commodities investor guy. So while I may not even believe everything he's saying here or think he's right, a lot of it he will say is theorizing. But also, I like this perspective because it comes from someone who's more looking at it from a pragmatic side, and I think this guy cares more about his money probably than anything else. And so I think he has less of it. He's not a Democrat or Republican partisan in any way, and he's not an American. So I don't think he has any kind of vested interest in putting any kind of a like partisan political spin on what he's saying. And so I think got some notes here. Let me just start you out with this guy's introduction and what he says here, because this is very interesting.
36% of us have voted, and I wanted you to.
Oh, sorry, that's wrong. My bad. Wrong clip. Whoops. All right, let's get it started. Here we go.
So I think that's the 60,000 foot view of what's actually going on. And then Trump has been in power for about a year now.
Let me go back here.
In May 2022, he
and losers to be once the dust settles.
I'm not sure where to start, but I'll start again with George Soros. In May 2022, he told us that what we're experiencing in the world is a conflict between two systems of governance. And I would say that it's probably one system of governance versus everybody else, which is the European oligarchic, neo-colonial, imperialist system of governance against everybody else. So I think that's the 60,000 foot view of what's actually going on. And then Trump, has been in power for about a year now.
So right there, what this guy is saying is that the current administration is a break from the typical European oligarchic power structure. Now, as we're going to get to later with Jiang, that doesn't mean that Trump is the good guy or the working man insurgent. We're not saying that. There is, however, a conflict going on here. And I think that's what this guy gets into that's interesting. So
now, just about. And
make sure this is up all the way.
Before he even was inaugurated, on the 15th January of last year, Marco Rubio was being grilled in front of the Senate for his confirmation hearings. And on that occasion, he said a number of very important things, namely that Trump administration considers the post-World War II global order more than obsolete, that it has indeed been weaponized against the United States, and that the new reality are multipolar integrations. Now, at that point, it was very hard to say whether Rubio meant this, but my guess was that he wouldn't have said it if he didn't mean it, because in U.S. politics, it's easy enough to continue to go along with the same policy as before. We are the hegemon, everybody else has to submit, and that's how it's going to be. So you wouldn't announce a radical departure from that policy unless you actually meant it. And so
so I want to stop here for a second, because that's kind of a huge thing that he's talking about here, and he backs it up with evidence. Rubio did say this in his kind of incoming hearing to be Secretary of State. Now, the other point he makes here is, why would Rubio say what he said, this is the end, we believe that the post-World War II global order is dead, if he didn't believe it? Because it's very easy for these guys to go like, oh yes, Europe is the best, and go along with it and get their check and, continue as normal. So those are two really good points, but let me let him keep going here, because it gets better.
For the past 12 months, I've been observing events very closely, and I've been trying very hard to understand what's going on. And my impression is that Trump is actually delivering on all that. Namely, he's pretty much demolishing the post-World War II global order, the rules-based global order, as they like to call it. And he has been working in favor of multipolar integrations. None of
this was filmed before Davos, when the infamous speech was given by Mark Carney of Canada, who's a banker that was installed as the Prime Minister of Canada. He wasn't voted for. Where he said he basically exposed the multipolar rules-based order, or the rules-based order, as garbage. He's like, we went along with it because we benefited from it for a long time, and now we don't benefit from it anymore, so we're getting out. So Crane here said all this before that happened. Keep that in mind.
Of that is very obvious. And I think that the reason why none of this is very obvious is because, after 60 years, after 80 years since World War II, we've been all inured to a certain mindset. And, some of the constants of these 80 years is that Russia and China are rivals. Russia indeed is an enemy, always has been, right? That's practically the constant of the global landscape as people recognize it. At the same time, the Europeans are our allies. The British special relations.
We've all seen Rocky IV. We all know the Russians are bad. We've well, not all of us, but people my age who endured the 80s saw plenty of anti-Russian Cold War propaganda. Red Dawn, Ruskies, Rocky IV.
Very close friends. The French, the Germans, the Italians, all of these are our allies. When I say our, I'm not American. I'm just saying from the point of view of the American officialdom, diplomats, military personnel, CIA, the academic and think tank world, all of that. And then, we have this undying devotion to the state of Israel, which is completely irrational and sentimental, but we don't question it. It just is at all cost. It doesn't matter, what the
That's part of the World War II global order, post-World War II global order. And I listen to what he says here.
Consequences might be. That just stays. We dominate Eurasian landmass. We kind of ignore our own neighborhood for the most part. And we are working hard together, covertly together with the MI6 and the British on subjugating and colonizing Africa. That's how it was.
Also, I think he mentions this later, but that's part of the problem with the Middle East. We are working as vassals to Britain, probably more so than Israel in that scenario, which is interesting perspective.
And now over the last year, we see that Trump has upended practically all of that. We see that, first of all, almost just a few weeks into his presidency, he picked up the phone and called up Vladimir Putin, which is extremely important because the relationship between Russia and the United States is far and away the greatest factor of the future of peace for humanity. These are two nuclear superpowers, and whether they can cooperate and coordinate their policy in a constructive and friendly way, or whether they are just enemies with no communications, is a massively important fact.
So I'm going to take a quick sidebar here because, again, this was filmed a little while back and there's new news. I was listening to, I believe it was Scott Ritter, actually. Don't quote me on that. It was either Scott Ritter or McGregor. One of those guys on one of those shows was saying that since the Alaska meeting that Trump had with Putin, people have been leaking in the State Department what's going on with Russia because they're trying to stop him from ending the Ukraine war because it's a major money boondoggle for a lot of those people that he mentioned. And what they were saying is that Trump started communicating directly with the Russians via back channels and going around the State Department for that reason. So I say this not, again, to defend Trump, but to present kind of an alternate perspective to the constant circus drone about what's actually going on. Because you have to remember that the global elite and the media that supports that they own has differences with Trump. And they have a tool to make you think things that might not be true. And so I think it's interesting, this dynamic with the Russian war, I think is one that plays out in other political, on other political stages where you have Trump is trying to do the things he ran on, I think, in some cases, not every case, but in a lot of cases, but he has such immense pushback from the entrenched, kind of forces, the deep state, if you will, that he has to find creative ways around it. And the Maduro thing is going to come up in a minute. And I think this guy has some interesting commentary on that. But let me.
And so the fact that Trump did that is a hugely positive development. Things in the Middle East are very, very touchy because that's one of the constants of the United States internal politics, the support for Israel. And there you have a very powerful segment of the voters, which is the Zionist Jews and the evangelical Christians. And they are all extremely passionate supporters of Israel. And they're also a very large voter bloc. I think my understanding is that we're talking about between 60 and 80 million people who fall into this category.
He just said Zionist, which is a banned term now on TikTok. And it got me thinking about Mike Huckabee, because Mike Huckabee is a Zionist and he's not Jewish. So the idea that Zionist is a like anti-Semitic, like anti-Jewish thing is a joke, because there's plenty of quote unquote Zionists who are not Jewish. And Mike Huckabee is one of them. And then there are several other evangelicals as well.
And then we also know that a lot of these Zionist Jews are also very wealthy political donors, very wealthy and very active. So Trump facing next year's pivotal midterm elections has to navigate this very carefully. The situation is festering a little bit, but, well, it's not festering a little bit, it's festering in the worst imaginable way. But Trump has attempted to bring peace to the Palestinian people. They're still getting killed on a daily basis, but less than before the peace. So, it's a relative positive. And now, latest news.
Is it really less, or are we just
Trump invited Vladimir Putin to the board of peace for Palestine, which is a very, very good sign, which is a very hopeful sign. Ukraine, that conflict, Trump sidestepped it, because when his administration started last year, February, March, there was a lot of back and forth between the European powers and the United States and Zelensky. Remember Zelensky traveling back and forth, and the Europeans, and then Zelensky going to the United States and then running back for hugs and safe space to London and Paris. The key element in all those discussions was the United States providing a security guarantee for Ukraine. That was the most important thing that the Zelensky and the Europeans wanted to obtain from Trump. Why? Because if the United States gave a credible security guarantee to Ukraine, that would mean that Britain, France, Germany could send troops into Ukraine. And these would be kind of tripwire troops, because they would be small. There would be 10, 20, 30,000 troops tops. The only purpose they would serve there is to trigger the American entry into the war. So the troops go into Ukraine, the Russians attack them, and then London, Paris, Berlin, they say, oh, look, what the Russians did to us. Now you have to deliver on your security guarantee. And then the United States is in that war, and you get collective conflict between Russia and the collective West. So pretty much a World War III scenario. And Trump completely extricated the United States from that and said, not interested, you're on your own.
So again, I don't want this to seem like defend Trump hour, but these are the types of angles that I don't think get much airtime in the press, as the kind of hysteria over ICE ratchets up, and we're going to get into that in just a minute. But this guy makes a lot of other good points. So he's going to talk about right now the Maduro thing. And I have a sidebar for this. So this is going to be a whole kind of thing on its own. But I want you to listen to what his claim about why they kidnapped Maduro is, because it is suspicious how easy it was for them to do that. You have to admit that, even if you're not a conspiracy theorist. But listen to what this guy says, because it's interesting theory.
Venezuela, the most confusing part, in addition to Argentina, I have to say, that I had a very, very hard time understanding Trump's gambit there, because it was extremely risky. And I didn't understand for the longest time why. I still don't understand, but I'll share an educated guess about that. So 2nd January of this year, Trump sends his troops, Delta Force, to abduct Nicolas Maduro and bring him to trial to the United States. Everything about that affair is extremely strange. and extremely unlikely. But it's not just what happened; it's also what didn't happen. Because, if it were, let's say, if it were strictly about drugs trafficking, it doesn't make sense, because in that case, your suspect number one are the money laundering banks, which are principally United States,
Maduro called
Canada,
out.
and these European banks in the offshore centers in the Caribbean. Your suspect number two would probably be Ecuador, number three, Mexico, number four, Canada. And then Venezuela, if it features in that list at all, is somewhere way down after Colombia and some other nations. So that didn't make sense. The second thing that didn't make sense is the oil. Because if you wanted the oil, Maduro was already giving it. Maduro was already saying, here, set your terms, we'll do a deal. And so you could have done that. The United States is far and away the most powerful nation in that hemisphere, right? And the biggest market. And they could have said, we're going to buy all your oil, and we're going to set the terms, we're going to set the price. And Maduro's government would have said, yeah, okay, fine. That's a deal. So why risk a horrible mishap? If Venezuelans responded, if they managed to shoot down any of those helicopters, I think 8 of them went on the mission. If they fired an anti-ship rocket at any of the American vessels in the region and sunk a ship with hundreds or maybe thousands of Marines going to the bottom of the sea, it would have been the end of his presidency. So why risk it? In the end, I came to the conclusion that one plausible explanation, and to my mind, maybe the most plausible explanation, was that Trump extricated Maduro from Venezuela in order to preempt a regime change.
Okay, so I want to stop there for a second, because that's a pretty bold claim. But he does say a plausible explanation, one plausible explanation. So he's not saying, I know this for a fact, but he is making a good point, and I'm going to show you why in just a second. Let me let him finish.
It was coming from elsewhere, not from the Trump administration. And here's why I think that. Keep in mind that one of the organizations that's very, very active in South America is called Organization of American States, OAS. It's an international organization that works in conjunction with the United Nations, but it's not part of the United Nations. They just kind of work together. And then it partners with a whole lot of these World Health Organization and Facebook and Google and all kinds of military contractors. So it's a very, very extensive organization, but it works completely outside of the law. They have a legal immunity. Their premises are inviolable. Their archives are inviolable. They're completely, even though their headquarters in Washington, D.C., they're completely out of reach of the American law enforcement.
Okay, so I want to take a quick sidebar here and show you some stuff. So what is OAS? Organization of American States. What exactly is OAS? Well, OAS is an organization founded on the 30th of April, 1948, to promote cooperation among its member states within the Americas. Headquartered in Washington, D.C., the OAS is a multilateral regional body focused on human rights, buzzwords here, electoral oversight, because if anyone should have electoral oversight over other people's election, it should be an organization based in the United States, right? Social and economic development and security in the Western Hemisphere, according to the Council on Foreign Relations. As of November 2023, 32 states in the Americas are OAS members. So the surname of this guy is not that important, but I want to jump to this slide about the creation of OAS. So the 9th International Conference of American States was held in Bogota between March and May 1948, right after World War II, and led by United States Secretary of State George Marshall, a meeting which led to a pledge by members to fight communism. There you go, to fight communism. So this is one of those global NGOs that has the backing and the power to go around elected leaders. As it stands today, with the signature by 21 American countries, the center of the Organization of American States on 30th April of 1948, The meeting also adopted the American Declaration of the Rights and Duties of Man, the world's first general human rights instrument. The transition from Pan-American Union to OAS would have been smooth if it had not been for the assassination, interesting, of Colombian leader Jorge Eliezer Gaitan, the Director General of the Pan-American Union. Alberto Lleras Camargo became the organization's first Secretary General. So I don't want to read you the entire history of this. We're going to jump up to the 21st century now, because as we've learned, their mission is to fight communism. And so what does that mean? That means if a leader elected in a country that they think is quote unquote a communist, they're going to take him out. So here's the 21st century. The OAS conducted an audit of the 2019 Bolivian general election, which opposition supporters argued was fraudulent. The OAS report contended that the results were marred by clear manipulation and significant irregularities leading to the 2019 Bolivian political crisis. Bolivian President Evo Morales resigned soon after having lost the confidence of the country's military in what he described as a coup. Some media outlets debated whether it should be referred to as a coup. Of course they did. On 21 December, the technical mission of electoral experts sent by the European Union published an 67-page report which made similar observations and conclusions to that of the OAS. They noted, so that Europeans are helping the OAS, that there were minutes with an unusually high number of null votes, blank votes, and 100% participation of voters in a series of polling stations, highlighted by the general failure of TSE to declare these irregularities. Studies commissioned by the American left-leaning think tank CEPR argued that the OAS report's statistical analysis was inaccurate and unreliable. The author of the OAS's vote return analysis stated that CEPR's explanation of the results was implausible. The organization has been criticized by Mexico and the CEPR for their perception of interference into the internal affairs of Bolivia. The OAS observed the subsequent 2020 Bolivian general election, stating there was no evidence of fraud because the person that they liked won. The New York Times concluded there was some fraud, but that it was unclear how much of it was sufficient to change the result of the election, and suggested the initial analysis by the OAS was flawed. So here is kind of like a quick timeline of the OAS. This is like later in it. I didn't, the first parts are all showing, but I wanted to show you some of this. So OAS suspends Cuba in 1962. Communists. Convention of Human Rights gets signed. OAS General Assembly established. Inter-American Court of Human Rights created. So they do all this stuff. First Summit of the Americas in Miami, Inter-American. So then you get up here to 2017. Venezuela announces it would begin process to leave the OAS, accusing the organization of interference in Venezuela's political crisis. So 2019 is when the Juan Guaido thing happened, if you remember. And here is a report from the Gray Zone about the Bolivia election. This is about the Evo Morales election. And I just took little clips of these so we can just touch on them real quick, because there's a great epic incident of Gray Zone trolling here. But here they say the U.S. targeted Evo Morales for overthrow ever since he became president, and the Organization of American States helped set the stage for Bolivia's coup. So the pattern with these guys is anyone who's elected by the people who has socialist inclinations that wants to like share oil profits with the population immediately gets OAS on their ass. Oh, the election wasn't good. The United States and the Organization of American States can add another coup to their scorecards, even if U.S. media refuses to recognize it as such. This time it was in Bolivia, where President Evo Morales was forced to step down on November 10th, following weeks of pressure and extremist violence. Morales resigned. Sounds kind of like what's going on in Iran right now, doesn't it? Interesting. Morales resigned under duress in order to avoid bloodshed, and emphasized that his responsibility as an indigenous president of all Bolivians is to prevent the coup mongers from persecuting my trade unionist brothers and sisters, abusing and kidnapping their families, burning the homes of governors or legislators of city councilors, to prevent them from continuing to harass and persecute my indigenous brothers and sisters and the leaders and authorities of the MAS, Movement Towards Socialism, Morales' political party. His resignation is yet to take effect, as it must be approved by the legislature. This did not stop opposition party member Janine Áñez, the Senate's second vice president, from declaring herself interim president. Yay, a girl! Woo! Americans cheer. Further proving that what's happened is a coup.
Put a chick in it, make her gay.
So now we're going to jump up to, this is epic trolling by the Gray Zone here during the Democratic primary. I threw this in just for shits and giggles, but it's pretty funny. So the Gray Zone and Code Pink demand emergency OAS election observers in 2020 Democratic presidential primary. So this is from March 9th of 2020. Just a little trip down memory lane here back to 2020. In light of clear irregularities in voting results in the 2020 Democratic presidential primary and structural barriers to voter participation, the Gray Zone and Code Pink call on the Organization of American States to provide emergency international election monitors in the primary contest. The OAS must send an emergency election monitoring team to the United States to ensure independent scrutiny of a presidential primary that has been marred by clear irregularities and the systematic and highly discriminatory obstruction of citizens' rights to vote. Gray Zone editor Max Blumenthal stated, since its foundation in 1962, the OAS has dispatched hundreds of election monitoring teams to countries across the Western Hemisphere, but it has monitored a U.S. election only once in history in 2016 after Donald Trump claimed that the vote would be rigged. So Gray Zone doing some epic trolling here. So in October 2019, the OAS accused the Bolivian government of irregularities in vote counting during the country's presidential election. The organization issued a formal statement expressing deep concern and surprise at the drastic and hard to explain change in the trend of preliminary results after the closing of the polls. Within days, a military coup was put into motion that resulted in the forcible removal of President Evo Morales, the winner of the presidential election, and the installation of a brutally repressive government. While the OAS's findings in Bolivia have been comprehensively discredited by researchers from the Center for Economic Policy Research and the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, it is incumbent on this organization to uphold the same standards it applies in countries targeted by the United States for regime change to the United States itself, said Code Pink co-founder Medea Benjamin. And so what you had after this was, and this is on their charter back here, the removal of Nicaragua from OAS. And here's a quick run through on that. Debunking myths about Nicaragua's 2020 elections under attack by EU, USA, and OAS. So this is from Ben Norton, who's actually no longer with the Gray Zone, from November 11th of 2021. Managua, Nicaragua. Millions of Nicaraguans went to the polls on November 7th, 2021, re-electing the leftist Sandinista Front and President Daniel Ortega by a large margin. The Joe Biden administration refused to recognize the results. However, the United States and its allies in the EU and the Organization of American States have instead launched what essentially amounts to a new coup attempt against Nicaragua's Sandinista government. On November 10th, President Biden signed the Renacer Act, which will impose more crushing sanctions on Nicaragua. Washington's escalating campaign of economic war was supplemented by the OAS's claim that the election was illegitimate. So that's what this organization does. It does regime change in South American countries. This campaign of hybrid warfare aimed at overthrowing Nicaragua's Sandinista government has many parallels with the ongoing U.S. coup attempts against Venezuela and Cuba, as well as the military putsch the OAS oversaw against Bolivia's elected socialist president Evo Morales in 2019. Indeed, it involves many of the same tactics and players. Following the line of Washington and Brussels, international corporate media outlets have spread an array of demonstrably false claims about Nicaragua's 2021 elections, incorrectly reporting, for instance, that the government banned anti-Sandinista parties, that is, imprisoned candidates, or that voter turnout was negligible. Unlike foreign reporters spreading these falsehoods from Florida, Costa Rica, or Spain, the Gray Zone was on the ground in Nicaragua to observe the electoral process. This reporter, Ben Norton, visited 4 different polling stations in various parts of Chinandega, one of the largest cities in the country. There I spoke to more than a dozen average voters to hear their experiences and get their perspectives on the election. Everyone I interviewed said the process was clean, fair, and transparent, and that they were able to vote without any difficulties. Differing stories, eh? So here's a tweet from when Ben was in Nicaragua. I took these photos at different voting centers in Nicaragua on election day, November 7th. As you can see, there were a lot of people voting, but in a transparent, well-organized election. The polls were full, but people were able to go in, vote, and go home in a quick and open process. So now we circle back to Venezuela. This is a tweet from Combate back in 2024, so not that long ago, 2 years ago, little less than 2 years ago, July 29th, 2024. Maduro is live streaming all the acts of vandalism and violence by opposition thugs. So this was happening while Biden was still president, right? This man was captured burning the electoral headquarters in Coro. He confessed he was paid to do so. Watch U.S. government, the OAS and UN say freedom for these political prisoners. And I have a clip of Maduro, but I don't think that it's necessary that we watch that. I just wanted to go down this kind of sidebar to show you that what Alex here is saying about OAS potentially attempting to regime change Maduro and Trump kidnapping him for that reason kind of makes sense, because, well, let me let him finish. Actually, let's just go back to Alex here.
Okay, park that thought. Organization of American States. In 2024, after the last elections in Venezuela, when Nicolas Maduro won, the G7 group of nations at one of their summits issued a statement saying that they do not consider Venezuelan elections legitimate, and they don't consider Nicolas Maduro the legitimate president of Venezuela. And they designated another person, which wasn't Juan Guaido, but I think it was a person whose name I forget now, who was the Speaker of Venezuelan Parliament at the time when Maduro declared himself to be the president of Venezuela. Okay, so already we see that a group of countries, and at the time, in 2024, the United States, as part of the G7, was signed off on this statement. There's no signatures, but they're part of it. And it was under Biden, so it was the Blinken-Sullivan-Nuland administration. And so they already had their crosshairs on Nicolas Maduro. And then this whole nomination of Maria Corina Machado for a Nobel Peace Prize is very suspect as well, because that didn't come from Donald Trump either. Where did it come from? So my take is that it probably came from some of these global international organizations, which could have been, World Economic Forum. It might have been the City of London, whatever. It's one of these. You remember going back to George Soros, two systems of governance. It's coming from this globalist neo-colonial system of governance, whatever the actual source of pressure was to designate Maria Corina Machado as Nobel Peace Prize recipient. And why would they do that? Well, kind of to anoint her as the next leader of Venezuela, because that's already like a certain how do you call it, reputational advantage over any other candidates. So I think.
Oh, there you go. That is very interesting, because I think this was also filmed before she went and gave her Nobel Peace Prize to Trump in an attempt to kind of like, hey, come on, like, I know you got Maduro, but put me in as the leader. And it's interesting because after this happened, you'll notice a lot of people were like, wow, it's kind of weird how they left the VP and all the government that was already there in place. And they're saying now that she's going to work with the US. So this guy's theory holds a lot of weight, I think, especially when you consider all the data I just showed you about OAS and their track record. It makes me wonder, the Guaido thing was already in play when Trump came in, and you saw how the Democrats supported it. Pelosi and Trump famously got up together and said, Juan Guaido is the real president of Venezuela at that. And I'm sure that Trump was dragged along with that. But this time around, he knows what they're trying to do. And maybe, just maybe, and again, this is not apologize for Trump hour, but just maybe this guy is right. And like I said earlier, in order to get around some of these entrenched interests, you have to be somewhat creative, just like the back channel Russia negotiations thing. So no, this guy keep going because he's got a couple more interesting points.
I think that they were preparing some kind of a Venezuelan spring there. Okay. Kind of like what they triggered in Iran now.
There you go. There you go.
And it seems to me that the Trump administration, to not allow these forces to take a whole beachhead in their region, which would be Venezuela, they decided to do the move of getting Maduro out. So as far as everybody else, as far as the news cycle is concerned, we had a regime change. It's no longer Maduro, but leaving all the rest intact. So his handpicked successor, Delcy Rodriguez, forms the government. The military, the police, nothing else changes, not a thing. And so he kind of front ran them if they were going to orchestrate a regime change in Venezuela. And now he's working with that government. And then last point, Iran. That's another place where if you look at the news cycle, you get the impression that Trump is playing this evil game of waging war on Iran. He's going to regime change Iran and on and on and on. But none of that has happened. And about a week ago,
it's still going on. And this is the thing. I'm going to let him finish. I'm going to let you finish. But this goes back to what I was talking about with the endless humming circus drone, because people in the press want him to attack Iran. So that's why they keep saying he's going to, in the hopes that eventually that reality will just manifest. And it hasn't yet. I'm not saying it won't. Believe me, I'm not one to make any kind of hard predictions when it comes to these politics, but let's listen to what else he has to say.
I think it was Monday last week. I was on a podcast with Professor Glenn Deason, and we talked. He asked me about this, and I told him, look, he's not going to launch an attack on Iran. Everybody was saying that he was just about to bomb Iran, like in the next 12 to 24 hours. And I said, no, he's not going to do it. And the way I've been able to predict this, I mean, now people will say like, oh yeah, but it's because the Iranians neutralized Starlink, and then Saudis and Qatar and all of these countries denied airspace to American aircraft, so he couldn't, and on and on and on. Okay, fine. The outcome is he didn't bomb Iran. And then if you rewind the clock to June of last year, same thing. It was all building up. And on a few podcasts, I said, either he's not going to bomb Iran or he's going to do a fake war, meaning, some token missiles and bombs, a friendly handshake, a polite response, polite retaliation from Iran, saying, excuse me.
He's got to throw some red meat to the pigs, to the war pigs. And again, I don't want people to come at me like, bro, I can't believe you're defending Trump. I'm not defending Trump. I don't think that he's better than the alternatives at this point. However, I shouldn't say that. There's a couple things he's done that I think. He pardoned Ross Ulbricht, okay? He just rescheduled pot. So those are two things in the plus category for me with Trump, despite all the other hysteria that's going on right now. But I'm just trying to be honest here.
Terribly sorry. We're going to bomb your base in Qatar there. Please be sure to evacuate so there's no casualties. Thank you very much. And then the Iranians launch a retaliatory attack on that base. No
deaths,
casualties reported. And then Trump thanks the Iranians for the courtesy and says, we obliterated the nuclear program in Iran, right? Everybody knows that that's not true, but Trump for weeks is insisting on that word, obliterated the nuclear program. Why? The reason why is because that nuclear program was the West's justification for going to war against Iran. So if you obliterated the justification, no more reason to go to war against Iran. And so the whole thing died.
That's why now the justification is that they're killing thousands and thousands of people. If you've noticed, that is the justification. Oh, they're murdering 30,000 people. I see all these dumbass like rock stars, like Young Blood or whatever. Like, oh, you guys, we got to support overthrowing the Iranian government, everybody. Here's my next song. Get down on your knees and lick the boots of empire. All right, let's go, guys. Yay.
For the next 6 months. And then if we rewind the clock farther back to 2019, we remember that in June of 2019, the Iranians downed a drone in the Persian Gulf, an American drone. And then the pressure mounted on Trump to launch a war, to go to war against Iran, to launch a bombing raid. And Trump said no. That was the third time pressure built on him to go to war against Iran. And the third time he kind of ditched it. But what was very indicative in 2019 is that after he said no, Anonymous leaked a whole bunch of cables between the British embassy in Washington and the Foreign Office in London.
Listen to this.
And from those leaks, we were able to work out that it was the British embassy who was leading the pack in lobbying the Trump administration to start bombing Iran. It was Ambassador Sir Kim Derrick, who has been.
If you know about the Balfour Declaration and the history of our good friends in the Middle East, you know that the progenitors, the originators of that project are the Brits. And so it's interesting to make that connection that, hey, maybe it's not just, Netanyahu and his crew that's had the United States on the leash for this like Middle Eastern project. Maybe it's the British MI6 intelligence and the British, oligarchy, the banking cartels. And who knows? I mean, that's my conspiracy theory, full disclosure. But interesting.
Pushing a lot of these, what he called Trump whisperers, to influence Trump to order bombing of Iran. And then when he said no, Kim Derrick fired off a whole bunch of cables to London, berating Trump, calling him incompetent and inept and unreliable.
So when you hear this, too, it kind of gives you a better understanding of his contempt for Europe and his contempt for the EU and that whole thing. And it's kind of like, okay. And, Glenn Deason himself has said that like the stuff Trump said to the EU, like smacking them around, is like music to the ears of a lot of people in the EU who hate those people as much as we hate a lot of our politicians.
And all these things. But he said, if we surround Trump, if we flood the zone around Trump with these Trump whisperers, that the next time Iran does anything unseemly in the region, that they will be able to tip Trump over the edge and launch that war. So the whole story tells us that it's the British who are, again, manipulating the United States into waging a dirty war, ultimately to the benefit of their Zionist project, which is Israel. And their own, and why does the Zionist project exist in the first place? It's because it's their beachhead to dominate the whole Middle Eastern region and its energy resources and its trade routes. The Suez Canal, the future pipelines from Qatar over Syria and Iraq and Israel to Haifa, the plans that they had. And so in this past 12 months, Trump has pretty much demolished all of those plans. And all of them set Great Britain at a disadvantage. It's weakening their position. And there's also the question of Bosnia and Herzegovina in the Balkans. We're going to shorten that one, but basically the British were rigging the region to create the second front in the conflict between West and Russia. And Trump pretty much went there, told them, get lost, there's a new sheriff in town. And since then, Bosnia and Herzegovina has been pacified. And I have this from a member of the cabinet of Republika Srpska firsthand. I asked him face to face. He explained all this to me. It seems
this guy's a Croatian investor. So again, I take a lot of what he says with, extreme skepticism, but it's definitely an interesting take from a guy who his primary focus, his primary motivation is money, not politics, not right or left politics. So he's looking at this from a standpoint of, I want the, United States to stay solvent because I have investments, let's listen to a little bit more of this before we cut out.
That what Marco Rubio told to the Senate last January is exactly what the Trump administration is doing now. It's hard to read because it's extremely chaotic. Trump's own public statements, press releases are insane, but I think that they are deliberately insane because he just creates hysteria. And then when people latch on to the last dumb thing he said, he's already doing something else.
Yep.
Anyway, you and I are both sitting in Europe.
So I'm going to stop there. But I think that is a very interesting kind of perspective on what's going on from someone, an unlikely voice. And, take it for what it's worth. Take it for what it's worth. We're going to see how things play out. But so far, he's been right. There hasn't been an attack on Iran yet. And you could argue, oh, that's because they know Iran has missiles that can hit Tel Aviv now, or, XYZ, or because they know, XYZ. But it's so far, it seems like nothing. And even today I've heard, it's imminent, attack is imminent. There's, but like I said, the media, it's almost like they keep repeating this stuff hypnotically until it happens sometimes, like the Civil War thing. And that is our next topic of interest today, is emotional manipulation in the media. And it's funny because I'm a left-leaning guy. I've never made any bones about it. I've never been one of those supply side economic guys like, just take the taxes off the rich and everything will trickle down. It'll work beautifully, just like it has since Reagan. It's been great. Can't you see? It's been great for a certain type of person. And there's nothing wrong with making money either. That's the other thing, is like you get put in this kind of category of like, oh, you just hate success and you're like anti-capitalist. No, I'm not actually anti-capitalist. If we actually had fair capitalism, it would be a different story though. We don't have that. We have an oligarchy where, the money at the top controls the dialogue and the choices in politics. And so we're going to get back to the Trump dynamic in a minute. But I want to talk about this media manipulation, because I was talking to a guy. I love the gym for this. I was talking to a dude this morning, rando in the sauna. Actually, two randos. And, don't picture this in your mind. We weren't naked or anything. It's not like that type of sauna. It wasn't like a bathhouse or anything. I know where your mind's going. But there was two guys, a younger dude, probably early 20s, and an older guy who it was his birthday. He told me, and he said he was 63. And so we get to talking, and he's like, oh, you got to do this and that, but you might not matter because the world's going to end anyway. And I said, I've been hearing people say that for years, and they've been saying that since the Roman Empire, that the end is nigh, right? Probably before that. And so, he's like, yeah, but there's going to be a civil war. And that right there kind of told me all I needed to know. And nothing about this guy. This guy was a great human being, really good dude. But that the propaganda is in full swing, because everyone is saying that now. Everyone's saying that. Everyone's like, oh, there's going to be a civil war. Oh, civil war is coming. It's coming. And I don't see it when I talk to people, because I think most people are on the same page, and this division is fostered. Like this guy just said, what Trump does, and he did it in his last presidential term. News media loves this guy because he's a constant clickbait generator. He's constantly saying or doing something crazy that they can report on. No one loves Trump more than the press, I would argue. Maybe the Democrats, because all they've done since he was elected the first time is go, Trump is bad. Trump is bad. Oh my God, Trump is bad. Hey, what do you guys stand for? We don't know, but Trump is bad. That's my impression of the Democrats. Hey, what's you guys' platform? Trump is bad. Oh my God. Oh, Trump is bad. It's like, all right, but like, what do you guys stand for politically? Did you know that Trump did this? He's so bad. That's the Democrats right now. It's pathetic. And that's why I say they're a dead party. But I want to get into AI right now, because there is a lot of manipulation going on. And this is an article I want to read you from is it last year? I think it's last year, November of 2025, I believe. And just read this headline, okay? I want you to read this headline and breathe deeply, because listen, I saw this happening months and months ago when Trump first came in, with people on Twitter that I follow who are like, look at this video of an Asian man being dragged and beaten from his home. And I'm like, okay, that's illegal. What's that guy's name? And it's on video. What's that guy's name? Where's the court case? I don't know. I just saw this emotionally triggering video on social media, and now I want to go to an ICE protest and get shot. That's what this started. So this is from Huffington Post. So, this ain't some like Wall Street Journal right-wing rag. This is Huffington Post. And the article is from the end of last year, November 14th of 2025. These viral ICE videos are actually AI, and that's not even the most disturbing part. Experts in deepfakes say we should be worried. You wanted to know where all that NGO money's going? It's going to people making AI ICE videos. I can almost guarantee you that one of these like NGOs that is funneling, is buying like some company to make AI ICE videos to spread around. Footage of real ICE raids are dramatic and disturbing enough as it is. Now Facebook users are being duped by AI-generated video, and TikTok and Instagram users by AI-generated videos that portray even more extreme deportations happening in public spaces, from city streets to Walmarts. As 404 Media reported Wednesday, a number of deepfake clips are going viral on the Meta-owned platform, which changed its content moderation rules after the 2024 election to have fewer restrictions on political topics like immigration and gender. Interesting. I mean, it sounds like they changed their policies to allow for more AI slop too. One viral clip purports to show Latino Walmart workers being lined up and put into a van with an immigration and CERs written on the back. One employee is ordered to, does that even make any sense? Is that really what it says? That's like an AI fuck up right there, if that's what it says, isn't it? Maybe I'm wrong. What is CERS? I don't know. Customs, I don't know. Written on the back. One employee is ordered to step up by an ICE agent with a police badge, but then does a weird sideways walk back into the line, suggesting something's off. Other videos posted by the same Facebook account, USA Journey 897, show McDonald's employees being similarly targeted in immigration raids, or food delivery workers on bikes being ambushed by ICE agents. None of these videos are real. They're riddled with telltale AI signs. In the Walmart video, that the man's unnatural gait and the misspellings throughout give it away, but people are still falling for them. So I made this song and I didn't record it, but the tune goes like this. The internet isn't real. So put down your phone and go outside now, because the internet isn't real. So put down your phone and go outside now, because the internet isn't real. There you go. Earworm for you. The internet isn't real. None of these videos are real. They're riddled with telltale AI signs. In the Walmart video, yeah, so we got that. It's about time they go to Walmart. One man commented on the clip, and you always have these douchebags like, yeah, I voted for this. No, you didn't, you stupid bastard. You voted for AI videos to trick you? Is that what you voted for, dipshit? It's about time they go to Walmart. One man commented on the clip, which has 4.1 million views, 16,700 likes, 1,900 comments, and 2,200 shares on Facebook. I almost believe that up until the last guy in the video, LOL, another man said of the weird walker. Admittedly, the clip, likely generated by OpenAI's Sora, is more sophisticated than the AI we've seen in the past. Another glossier, more dramatic AI-generated video shows a young woman being deported while screaming for the baby she's leaving behind. It doesn't get more emotional manipulation than that, my friends. And that is what has... See, and what people don't understand is that this is what leads to Renee Good. This is like fake video. I would not doubt if Renee Good saw the video of like the woman's baby being taken and screaming and thought it was real and ran out and got shot by police being a douche because she thought that they actually did that. And maybe they do stuff like that. And my argument has been the best way to fight that is in court, you guys. Like, if you think that running out into the streets and putting yourself between law enforcement officers and their targets is a good idea, you're a fucking moron. I'm sorry. I don't care what your politics are. That's dumb. Ask black people if they would do that. You don't see, notice how you don't see many, I mean, you do see them here or there, but you don't see a lot of black people out there getting between ICE and their targets because they know what's going to happen in those cases. And now it's white people too. So, I mean, and I don't support ICE shooting people either. It's not okay. I don't support ICE shooting people. I don't support Capitol Police shooting people. I don't support Derek Chauvin choking George Floyd out in the street because he's on fentanyl or whatever dumb fucks think the excuse should be. Yeah, what if that was your kid? What if your kid was on fentanyl? What if your kid lost his job and ended up on fentanyl and happened to be choked to death by a police officer in the street? Would you be making the argument, oh, he was on fentanyl, he had a police record? That doesn't matter. These people do not get to be they're not Judge fucking Dredd. You don't get to be judge, jury, and executioner. I don't care whether you're ICE, Capitol Police, local police, sheriffs, whatever. You took an oath to enforce the law, not to randomly shoot people you think are a threat. That's part of the job. If you're afraid, if you're that scared that you have to be on a hair trigger, you should be a bus driver instead. That's my argument. And listen, there are a lot of police officers that do great work. I got pulled over this morning by a police officer, in fact. And it's funny because, with all this stuff going on with people like not showing their IDs or whatever, police officers are pretty easy going if you are respectful of what they're doing. Like this guy today, and again, I was pulled over, but again, if someone came up to me on the street, if a cop came up to me, I was walking downtown, he's like, hey, I need to see some ID or something. I'd be annoyed, but I would show him my ID because I have to carry it anyway, and it's in my pocket. I wouldn't make a scene out of it, But today, this cop, I clearly broke the law. I sped up near a school area, and this guy came out of nowhere on a bike, like right on my ass, and I was like, "Oh shit, is this guy like a concerned citizen?" And then he turned the lights on and pulled me over. And the way that I handled the situation, when he came to the window, he's like, I saw you kind of speed up there in that school zone. I was like, oh my God, I didn't know it was a school zone, but I did speed up, and I do need to, watch myself. And I never act like I'm innocent when a cop pulls me over. I think that's another reason I probably get off okay without getting shot or brutalized, because I'm usually like, all right, you got me. What are we doing here? And the cop was very respectful. He just said, look, man, that's a school zone, and luckily there's no kids in the street right now, but we want you to slow down in that area. And so I'm going to let you off with a warning, but watch yourself in school zones. And that's fair, And it's like, again, I had to tell you that little anecdote just because I know plenty of Black people who feel the same way, and it's not that they don't have a level of paranoia that's warranted beyond mine, because they do, but don't get in front of cops. Fight it. Let's fight it in court, guys. You really want to be effective at saving your neighbors from being unfairly deported? Let's get a GoFundMe together for the court fees. Let's get them a good lawyer to fight what I mean? This whole, like, you're not making any sense here, guys. You're being emotionally manipulated by AI videos. So let's take a look at a couple of these, because I do have a couple of them to show you, because they do look legit. Like here's one where a cop goes into I think it's a school. Hold on. Yeah, so he goes in. You can see the Sora thing popping up now, but a lot of people didn't know that was a thing when this first came out, right? So it just looks like there's just an ICE guy going into a classroom to arrest a college student. And, if that was really happening, that would be outrageous. And yeah, the ICE person would probably be taken to court. Here's another one. So this is actually, they're saying that ICE agents are being arrested by New York cops now. This is an AI generated video. Look how good that is. That looks so legit. So to bring that full circle again, a lot of the chaos and the madness that we're being hypnotized into believing is real is not there. You open your door and you're like, oh, crickets. And listen, I have a friend in Minnesota. He actually said he was never really that against Trump, but based on what's going on there, he doesn't like Trump. Oh, my camera's glitching. But anyway, he's basically saying that the National Guard in the streets of his city and the stuff that's going on there now makes him like not like Trump, which I understand. And I just wanted to point out that I think a lot of this is being exacerbated. It's being intentionally exacerbated by, maybe it's forces, NGO forces. A lot of people are like, George Soros, damn you, Soros. It's like, okay, Soros is, I used to make fun of conservatives for that, but there's a lot of evidence that, he does fund a lot of shit. But he's a small part of the bigger puzzle. He's a small piece of the bigger puzzle, which is these organized NGOs and the groups that, this Alex Krainer guy was talking about that are in opposition to changing the status quo are going to use every tool that they have in their tool belt to emotionally manipulate you into doing things that you might not clearly think through, like going and getting in front of an ICE agent who's trying to make an arrest that you know nothing about. And it's funny because I was talking to someone earlier and I was like, if damn it, this camera is going. God damn it. I think it's time for me to get a new camera because this one is starting to trip out. There's like a short in the cable, I believe. Let me just turn that up a little bit. I got a new setup recently, as you can see. You might have, if you've been watching it all, you might notice like I got this snazzy new mic stand and a new computer and a whole bunch of my stream is a lot more solid these days. It sounds like I'm talking about taking a piss. My stream is better. My stream is stronger. So anyway, back to what we're talking about here with the emotional manipulation tactics and the way that we're kind of being whipped into a frenzy over things that aren't necessarily, things that we should be getting whipped into a frenzy over. The point I was getting to is I was talking to someone earlier about how if these protesters were really honest, they'd be out there in the streets with signs like, we support corporations' rights to have cheap illegal labor. We want the corporations to human traffic people to the United States and use them for cheap labor. That's what we support this. We support corporations and cheap labor. Woo! And listen, if the Trump administration is serious about ending this problem, and I've said this like a broken record time and time and time again, you cut the head off the snake. And I don't mean that in a violent way. I mean, you go straight to the source of employment. You go to the factory farms. You go to the companies that are taking advantage of cheap illegal labor, and you start policing and fining them heavily. And if you start doing that, you will see a drastic decline in the problem very quickly, because that's how you actually end a problem like that. Just getting the little guy, and there's a reason, they fill for-profit prisons by going after the little guys. There's a bunch of other, scumbags that benefit from the way they're doing it now. But hopefully moving forward, they get a little more wise. But again, this kind of domestic dispute in the streets of Minnesota is being done for reasons beyond immigration. And with that, I would like to jump to our final kind of piece of video for the day. And that is your boy, Professor Jiang. And if you've ever seen this guy, I'm sure you've seen him. He's on TikTok. Kurt Metzger had him on his show. He's on all kinds of shows, but he's a Chinese professor who, much like our boy Alex Krainer, who we just kind of listened to, has some unique takes or unique perspectives that are a little more based on rational thought and kind of like data than they are any kind of partisan politics or hysteria or hysterics, And this guy says a lot of stuff, so I'm not going to probably get to all of it, but I want to start with he kind of talks about the goals that the Trump administration has, and basically how, we're on the brink of a civil war if you watch the news and everything. So check this out.
We want to be partners, not vassals. But this kind of begs the question, though, that if the US wants to be hegemon, it does have to divide and rule. That is, impose this alliance
Divide and
system where you
conquer.
either, you weaken your adversaries and you make your allies dependent, like the war in Ukraine. I thought this is I would say good, but it's a way of weakening the Russians and making the Europeans more obedient. And this is, this is more or less the objective. But how do you make sense then of Trump's seeming desire to just throw away NATO as it is? Because it does seem that you do need this kind of alliance systems if you want to weaken adversaries and make sure.
It's funny because he's so right about that, and I never thought about it, but the Ukraine war really has made Europe, specifically Western Europe, like Germany, France, the UK, into vassals of the United States war machine. I mean, look at how, like, despite the leader that, like, if Trump had come in and been like, yeah, let's keep the war in Ukraine going and send tons of money and weapons, they would have been wholly on board. But because he's not, they're fighting him on it. And it kind of shows that they have vested interests in it continuing. So you know that a lot of them are getting, like what's her name? Kaya Kallas. That she's getting some kind of like reach around or kickback from the war. Same with Starmer and all these guys that are like relentless advocates for the continuation of the Ukraine war. And of course, this is speculation. YouTube, don't turn my stream off. I know that we're only supposed to say nice things about the Ukraine war and that we're winning. Big Brother is winning. The victory, drink our victory gin.
Sure that your vassals, toe the line. So why this rejection of such an alliance system when this is what you should be pursuing as a hegemonic instrument?
Right. So Trump's ultimate ambition is to create a Trump world order. And what he means by that is he wants to replace the old elite, the established elite, the global elite, with a new elite. Okay. So
this is kind of similar to what Alex Krainer was saying, but he gets into a little more of the current scenario, I think, here. And it's good.
What we're seeing right now in America is a civil war between left and right. And this is, and the ground zero for this, of course, is Minneapolis, where a couple of days ago, another American citizen was killed by ICE. Okay. So the first was Rennie Good, who was shot in the face 3 times by an ICE agent who claimed self-defense. But if you look at the video, that's debatable. But the second incident is a man named Alex Pretty. He's 37 years old and he's a nurse. And he was essentially executed.
Sidebar. That's another of the kind of damaging aspects of AI is with, things like this Alex Pretty shooting. Once that video of him gets out, someone else can take and make an alternate view of that video using AI that makes it look like the cop was justified. So you have to watch out for that kind of stuff as well in the age of AI. You just can't believe anything you see.
Executed by ICE agents in Minneapolis. And there are thousands of people now converging in Minneapolis. Tim Walz, the governor of Minnesota, has called up the National Guard. So you have the local police, you have ICE agents, and you have National Guard all converging in Minneapolis. So it's almost like a ground zero for a new civil war. Okay. The question then is, why is this happening? It's happening because you have 2 major factions in America fighting for supreme power. You have the old elite, who is like Wall Street. Okay. This is the global financial elite,
European
as
bankers
represented by Wall Street. But then you have a new elite that's up and coming. They're new money. So Silicon Valley, Palantir, as represented by Elon Musk and Peter Thiel. And they're the ones backing Trump. Okay. So the goal of Trump is to replace the federal bureaucracy in Washington and make it obedient and subservient to him. And that's why you're seeing all this conflict in the United States. But zoom out, an entire world is like this, where Trump's ambition is not to replace NATO per se, but to change the leadership of NATO and make NATO much more subservient to him. Right. So in his national security strategy, he's talked about backing politicians in Europe that are more amenable to American values, who believe in free speech, who believe in nationalism, who believe in people. Right. And these states are Poland, Austria, Hungary. OK, so it's not that Trump is turning away from Europe. It's more that he wants to reshape the political landscape of Europe. And Greenland is a very important point of conflict, right? Because why is Trump so adamant about taking over Greenland? There are already these agreements in place where Americans can use Greenland for whatever military purpose it deems fit. So there's actually no reason to take over Greenland. Why not maintain the illusion that NATO is still relevant? And the answer is because Trump wants the European leaders to lose face. He wants to embarrass NATO. He wants to show the European people, look, your leaders are powerless. your leaders are useless. So overthrow them and elect leaders
He's
that
doing it
can
too.
work with me. Okay. So in Germany, that's AfD, right? In France, that's Le Pen's party. In
So
Spain,
it's
that's
interesting too, because I don't know that the Europeans thought that Trump would be able to get back in, because what it seems like to me is they expected this to be ongoing, and the fact that Trump is kind of taking it away is making them angry. But what's also interesting about it is, I think it's telling that they let, if you remember, the Nord Stream pipeline was destroyed, and they were getting cheap Russian gas through that. So not only did Biden getting knocked out or the Democrats not winning screw them up in the Ukraine war is trying, they're trying to end the Ukraine war, the new administration, but also now Europe is dependent on United States energy because we made them cut themselves off from Russia. And they just did this whole thing where they're cheering themselves for banning Russian energy in their country, where it's not, now they're going to have to, they're basically just going to keep buying Russian energy through subsidiaries, through resellers like India or Pakistan or whatever, other countries in the region that are basically just buying it and reselling it at a markup. So it's kind of pathetic and hilarious, but he's right. Trump did really make these people look completely weak and powerless. And I mean, what can they really do?
Fox. Okay. So what Trump envisions is a radical political restructuring of Europe that is more right-leaning, anti-immigration, and more nativist. Okay. So to overturn the global order, essentially. And that's the main conflict in the world today.
Yeah, no, that's an interesting one. That it's not just the loyalty to the U.S. and power, but also has a civilizational interpretation here, because he sees the internal struggle within the West as also being of key importance. As you suggest, this also comes forth in the new national security strategy. So is this a struggle in Trump's mind for reviving, though, American and Western civilization? Because he talks about more or less saving Europe from the EU.
In his mind, he is the Messiah. In his mind, he believes that he's come to save America and to save Western civilization from woke politics, from the corruption of the global elite, from just the inequality in this world. Okay, so he sees himself as a messianic figure.
I mean, I will say this: I do like the tone that Trump and JD Vance have taken with Europe, because look at what they're doing with internet censorship there. I mean, we've played the clips. I should try to dig it up, probably, of 60 Minutes. Let me see if I have it on this machine. I think I have it. Where they're basically, the German authorities are saying it's okay for us to arrest you if you say something on social media that insults a politician. I might not have it on here. Yeah. Wait, maybe I do. Hold on. No, I don't have it on here. Well, anyway, you get the idea. I do like that tone, because Europe has been very censorious. There's something like, I think the UK put something like 12,000 people or something in jail last year for saying bad stuff on social media. And one of my most watched YouTube shorts is a clip of Mr. Bean talking about protecting speech. Some guy was put in jail for calling a cop's horse gay or something like that. Just, it's crazy. So I do like that tone. I do think one of the last, things America has going for it really is the First Amendment, and the idea that, hey, regardless of what you say, you can say it, but you just have to deal with the consequences. And I think about the Jane's Addiction record, Ritual de lo Habitual. The cover was kind of risque, so I got the edited one, and it had the First Amendment, Congress shall make no law, printed on it. And I thought that was great, because I always remembered the First Amendment because of that, respecting an establishment of religion or the lack thereof, or I don't remember the exact wording, but it was just, I thought it was pretty profound of them to do that. And that is, again, one of the things that, there's not a lot to be proud of being an American these days, let's be honest, but freedom of speech and the First Amendment, outside of, certain lobbies that are kind of trying to usurp that, is one of the last things we really have going for us that does make us, I think, a cut above maybe other societies that don't have that,
And quite honestly, there are many in the MAGA movement who do see him as the prophet and who do see him as someone who can fulfill the prophecy of a renewed America, to make America great again.
Those
But
people are
ultimately,
stupid.
what this means is that Trump needs to become emperor of America. His ambition is to become king. That means destroying the constitutional values and norms that underpin American society. And
See, this is where I kind of diverge with this guy, because I don't think that that's really the goal. I think that's kind of like the extreme viewpoint. And for example, Trump saying that he's going to run for a third term, that's trolling. He's not going to run for a third term. He can't. And I'll gladly admit that I'm wrong if he comes back and says like, oh, we're going to do this and this. Or what this guy argues is that he wants a civil war so that he can put the fucking country under, military lockdown or whatever to, usurp elections and all that. He had an opportunity to do that during COVID, right? Like he kind of like could have instigated martial law during the pandemic, and he kicked it to the states. And I know this because I lived in California and I traveled a couple of times, and I was like, holy shit, Utah's like not locked down and people are actually like sane here. Wow. And in California, it's like, where's your Vex card, pig? If you want to go anywhere. So it was different, and I know that Trump gets framed as this like Pol Pot, tin pot dictator type dude. I don't think that's necessarily the case. Like I said, I think he's a guy with a business mindset who, if his reputation was the guy who took over construction projects that were way overblown and past due and finishing them. And so it's like, I'll give him that, in that, with the Russian thing, for example, the creative way about which he's going about talking to the Russians in back channels to avoid the leaks and the kind of skullduggery of certain institutions. I think that's brilliant. I mean, that's the kind of leadership that the country kind of needs, is someone who's willing to, like, because the entrenched interests have the power and have the kind of I guess the foundation there to keep themselves in place and keep the elected leader of the people from changing anything that they don't want changed. And so I think that's one of the reasons Trump uses this rhetoric of like a dictator. Like, I wish I was a dictator because then I could really get stuff done, But I think he's it's like when he said, hey, Russia, why don't you investigate Hillary's? Why don't you know what I mean? Like he wasn't people like took that as like a serious call, like on national television for him to like, and he was just being a troll. He is the funniest president we've ever had. But let me let Jiang continue.
We will know this because he plans to run for a third term, which will be unprecedented in the 20th century. And not only does he plan on a third term, he plans on a fourth term, because in his mind, he needs time in order to revamp American society, to make America great again. And look, if he were not running for a third term, we cannot possibly explain the speed and the force by which he is revamping American society. Think about ICE, okay? Now, what's interesting about ICE is that it says that ICE exists in order to deport immigrants, right?
So this is the part that I do agree with, though. I do think that some of this ICE shit is a trial run for fascism. There's no doubt about that. But again, look at our country for the last 20 years, 30 years. Like, it's always been like this. Rodney King was beaten by police for, he'd break a traffic law or something. I don't, maybe he was drunk driving. Who knows? George Floyd was choked out by police. There was no political shit. So ICE murdering protesters in the street, it's nothing new. That's the thing. This level of brutality has been we've kind of shrugged our shoulders and let it happen for years and years and years. So the idea that like ICE is some new level of brutality, it's not. I'm sorry to burst your bubble, but is it bad? Yes. It's bad when any state authority kills a person, becomes judge, jury, and executioner. I will stand by that.
To get rid of illegal immigration, which is destroying the American economy. But if you look at the statistics, Obama actually deported more illegal immigrants than Trump did, even though Obama didn't have the budget and the resource that ICE has. And Obama never created conflict with the states. Okay, the states worked with Obama to remove illegal immigrants.
Right. And Obama also didn't have massive forces of the status quo aligned against him to make anything he did into a scandal in a gigantic episode. It just wasn't the same dynamic when Obama was doing it. They helped him. He's the black guy. So it was like, oh, it's okay for him to do racist shit to illegal immigrants.
So it was clearly about removing illegal immigrants. Then ICE is incompetent. But do you think that, ICE is actually meant to be a Gestapo? It's meant to be a new secret police that was only loyal to Trump? Then that makes a lot of sense, okay? And that helps us explain the incredible, unprecedented violence that is happening in the streets of Minneapolis right now.
It's not unprecedented, unfortunately.
These are extrajudicial executions, okay? There's no other word for what's happening.
They are.
Meant to incite a civil war. Meant to...
But again, extrajudicial execution. Fucking Ashley Babbitt was an extrajudicial execution. George Floyd was an extrajudicial execution. Renee Good was an extrajudicial execution. Like, this is not new. This is nothing new in the United States of America.
Enraged the people in the streets of Minnesota. Okay, it's not illegal immigrants versus ICE. It's white conservative men in white uniforms versus white liberal Americans. Okay, that's the conflict right now. And Trump understands that he needs to incite the civil war.
And they're emotionally manipulating those liberals to get out in the streets between these officers and their, apprehended targets or whatever you want to call them. Right or wrong, again, you fight this in court. You don't go down and get shot by an ICE agent trying to get in their way and prevent them from doing what they were being paid to do. Unfortunately,
so he can declare an insurrection. He can have emergency war powers. He can override elections. That is his plan. That's plan. And look, the evidence is actually pretty clear about what's happening.
Again, this is the thing about that is people said the same thing the first time he was president. Oh, he's not going to let it fucking see. There's an insurrection. He's not going to let it fly. He's not going to go. He's not going to leave. Remember, he won't leave if he gets voted out. Well, he left. So here he's going to talk about kind of the classes that are at war right now. And I thought this was kind of interesting point to touch on.
The idea that Trump's going to come and become your savior, I think that is a bit diluted. I think Trump's plan is to destroy the world so he can roll over the ashes. I think that's what's going to happen. But
I see, and I disagree with that. I really do. Like why would anyone do that? And also, yeah, anyway, I think that's a little misguided and over kind of blown, but I guess he has good reason to believe that.
You're right in that. You can make a legitimate argument that he really believes he wants to save the world. You can also make a legitimate argument that his followers are true believers and they're trying to make the world a better place. But historically, just look at historical patterns. When a figure like this emerges, and figures like this,
you could say the same thing about Obama. Right? Like we all thought Obama was a savior, that he was going to save America. He's going to change we can believe in. Not a fucking thing changed.
They end up destroying the world.
No, of course. Well, these leaders never appear in a vacuum. And there's I do see this being one of the consequences of having horrible leadership. I think Biden definitely fell in that category. But how do you explain this, though? The cause of it? Why are there such terrible leaders at the moment, not just in the United States, but across Europe as well? I mean, terrible in terms of there's no vision, there's no strategy. It's very dishonest. It's all about managing narratives. Overall, we don't see any leaders of the past. And again, this is Europe, where you began with the Peace of Westphalia. You came up with modern diplomacy. This is, I don't see any leaders again in Europe today, which seems to be able to get the continent back on track, which, then you kind of hand over the mantle to any, crazy leader, any strongman coming along claiming that he can fix the system if he just pushes the old order. Again, like I said at the outset of this, no one bears more of the blame for Donald Trump and the Trump administration than the Democratic Party. They had a gigantic movement behind them. A guy that was filling football stadiums full of people, excited voters, and they told us to touch grass. They told us to go away. And, some of them voted for Trump, but a lot of them just said, okay, fuck you. I'm not voting for Democrats then.
And that's why you have Trump. And, anyway, let me let him finish. I'm going to let you finish.
Side.
I think one of the greatest lies in our lives is that the meritocracy promotes the best leaders. Okay, so if you went to Yale, if you went to Harvard, if you went to Oxford, if you went to the Sorbonne, then you are the best and the brightest, and therefore you should rule. I went to Yale, okay, and I can tell you right now that you go to a place like Yale, you're not taught how to think critically. You're not taught how to be imaginative, how to have empathy, how to be resilient. You're taught how to speak in a very nice, articulate manner and to conform to the status quo. Okay, so if you look at the ruling
George
class
Bush went to
in
Yale.
America, the vast majority of people in Washington D.C., of the financial elite in Wall Street, the Silicon Valley, the media, okay, the universities, they all went to a few schools, and as a result, they live in a bubble. They see the world in a very jaded manner, and so they're unable to empathize with the suffering of ordinary people. They become disconnected with the ordinary people, and they can't possibly imagine what life is like for just a blue collar worker. That's one. Number two,
The people he's describing look kind of like this.
Ain't that America for you and me? Ain't that America?
is the problem with meritocracy is that if you think that you deserve what you have because you worked hard, then you also believe that other people who are poor deserve what they got because they're lazy. Okay, so the government should not help these people. The government should help immigrants. The government should help minorities. The government should help women because these are historically persecuted groups. But we should not help ordinary white men because they deserve what they got because you're stupid. I worked hard in school, and so I got a Yale. You didn't work hard in school, and so you should be a guardsman making very little money. You should be unemployed. Okay, so there's just this contempt. There's just this visual discontent for the ordinary people among the elite that drives a lot of their policies. Okay, and then the third.
It's funny because this got me thinking about the term elite, right? Because these people are not elite. That's the problem with America. Like he said, there's no meritocracy. The people that are the elite are not elite. They're all dumb fucks. They live in a world of groupthink, and we're trained at the same institutions, and they're robots. They think the same way. And you see that divide. That's the Democratic Party right now. It's those people, basically. And, the CIA people that live around Washington that are they're deeply entrenched in the government. That's it. The people that see the Lockheed Martin ads in the Wall Street Journal, that's what's left of the Democratic Party, And these people who think they're the elite, they're called the elite, but they're not elite. I know so many people who went to college that are so much dumber than I am, and I'm not the smartest person in the world. I'm not, I'm some kind of Mensa dude or something. But
and the most important is that when you go to a place like Yale, you've succeeded all your life. And so you're not capable of humility. You're not capable of self-reflection. Okay? So in 2016, when Trump won, this was a pivotal moment in Russian history. At this point, the elite could say, listen, why did Trump win? Well, it was probably because of inequality. It was probably because of those, because we bailed out Wall Street in 2008, right? We should bail out the homeowners, but instead we bailed out Wall Street. So it's our fault that the people elected Trump. This is a wake-up call for it. It's time for the elite to start working for the masses again. Instead, what happened? Instead, the elite said, oh, it's because Trump's a Putin spy. It's because he's a spy. And Russiagate, this hoax will prove that he's a spy. Okay, so it's not our fault. Oh, also, Trump cheated. It's because of Facebook. So they found all sorts of pretexts to disguise the fact that Trump won because of mismanagement by the elite. Okay, and so we have this elite class in America and Europe who are extremely arrogant. They live in their own bubble. They're mediocre, but they think that they're superior.
Yep.
And they're incapable of any humility, any empathy. And that's why we are where we are.
Yep. That's the Democrats, isn't it? So one last little bit of this I want to show you before we cut out here. So it's actually right here. Listen to this.
When you said this, I just clicked on a quote by Professor Richard Rorty, because he was making a similar point, but back in the 90s, because when the economic liberalism and globalization of the 1990s were gaining speed, he wrote this paragraph in his book, which I thought was great. And essentially this was predicting what excessive economic liberalism under globalization, that it would produce some political radicalism. So he wrote, there's a quote, members of labor unions and unorganized and unskilled workers will sooner or later realize that their government is not even trying to prevent wages from sinking or to prevent jobs from being exported. Around the same time, they will realize that suburban white-collar workers, themselves desperately afraid of being downsized, are not going to let themselves be taxed to provide social benefits for anyone else. At that point, something will crack. The suburban electorate will decide that the system has failed and start looking around for a strong man to vote for, someone willing to assure them that once he's elected, the smug bureaucrats, tricky lawyers, overpaid bond salesmen, and postmodernist professors will no longer be calling the shots. Once the strongman takes office, no one can predict what will happen. Unquote. This is
That's
this is 1998. This is
Yep.
how
That's
can you
exactly
better
right.
describe what
Almost
happened?
30 years ago.
Yep, that's exactly what happened. Exactly.
So,
Yep.
so it's rooted in globalization and the excess of economic liberalism. Is this what caused the problems which introduced the strongman, or how?
Yeah, look, I mean, look, you go back to the 1970s, and if you were living in the West at that time, right? Australia, Canada, Europe, America, you had the best life, right? Because you just work in a factory, and your wife could just stay at home and be just look after the kids. You got 3 kids, you got 2 cars, you could vacation in the winter and in the summer. You had a cottage probably. All 3 of your kids could go to university, right? And we're talking like just a factory worker. And like, this is a single household, okay? But then you had the Reagan Revolution. You had the rise of Margaret Thatcher in Britain,
Conservative
and then you had the
economics
rise of neoliberalism,
ruined that.
which allowed for the consolidation of wealth in the 1%. You also had globalization, so wealth was being transferred from the developing world into the developed world to create these speculative financial products like derivatives, right? So it went all wrong with the Reagan Revolution and the rise of neoliberalism, and that's the root of all the issues that we have today.
So there's 2 things that he touched on there that I think are interesting. One of them is he said, once like the working class will realize that the elites are not doing anything to stop the export of jobs or wages from going down. And then the white collar class will realize that they don't want to pay taxes to help the poor people that have been created by this exporting of jobs. And that's the modern Democratic Party. It's the white collar class, the professional managerial class. And I know this because I was one of them for a long time. I had a 6-figure office job in advertising, and I ran with these people in Los Angeles. And that is the Democratic Party now. It's people trying to protect what's theirs. They don't really, they'll posture about, identity politics stuff, but what they really care about is protecting their status. And so now you have this dynamic where, and then of course they told the populist left, the Bernie Sanders, wing of the party to touch grass. And so all you have left now is the same donors that fund the Republican Party. And then these kind of like people who are kind of almost Republicans anyway, outside of the, posturing, the moral posturing that they do in public. And so again, I think a lot of his takes on Trump, like wanting to like burn the world down so he can rule over the ashes, are a bit hyperbolic. Like I said, people said that last time he was president, that he wasn't going to go away. He was going to stay in office and rule like a dictator forever. And again, I just see, I wanted to kind of wrap this all up nicely by taking it back at the end there to the Democratic Party argument that, they're responsible more than anyone for Trump being president and the things that are happening right now. But then also that, we are being emotionally manipulated, and social media is way more powerful than television because it's way more targeted. They know everything about what you like. All kinds of data is being stored by your phone. So it's just a whole different dynamic where you have people being emotionally manipulated that wouldn't otherwise be emotionally manipulated. It's a gigantic advertising campaign, and it's designed to get you to do stupid shit that makes the fuse burn faster. Go out and get shot by an ICE agent, and then now there's an uprising against ICE agents because they shot someone after there was this organized effort to get people out there between them and the things they were hired to do, instead of people thinking rationally and going like, okay, let's all pool our money and put together a defense team and get some good lawyers to help the people that are being unfairly picked up and prosecuted. I think that would be and listen, I am not some wide-eyed optimist either. The economy is not great. It hasn't improved in the way that it should, but also there are little kernels of things happening that give me a little bit of hope. You know, I don't ever want to be completely black pilled. You know, I like to think that cooler heads will eventually prevail. I think the United States is full of top tier people, great people, but we're ruled by imbeciles and people who think that they are the elite, even though they are not. And so, yeah, I just wanted to present this alternate perspective to you, because like even the Maduro thing to me is very interesting. What Mr. Crane here was saying about how the Trump administration did a regime change to prevent OAS from doing it for them, and having this kind of globalist organization controlling the country instead. And so there's, and I think a lot of that gets lost in the fray because, like I said, Trump, you know, I'm not saying that he's some master of 4D chess or something, but people also act like he's a lot dumber than he is. You know, there's video of him saying when Twitter came out, he's like, I used to want to own a printing press, but now I've got this Twitter and I could just talk to millions of people instantly. He knows what he's doing. He knows how to wag the dog. He knows how to get everyone talking about one thing while he's quietly doing another thing behind the curtain. You know, he's definitely the first, I would say the first like media savvy president we've ever had. And because he came from the media, think about it. You know, he had The Apprentice. Before The Apprentice, he made himself into the rich guy brand. Rappers were like, I'm going to be like Donald Trump and shit. So in closing, watch out for emotional manipulation. Try to look at things through a lens of, you know, rationality. Don't let the television and social media whip you into a frenzy and go out and get yourself shot over something that probably could have been handled in court. You know, let's let cooler heads prevail here. And with that, I will see you again soon. And please hit me in the comments if you disagree with something I said, or if you agree with something I said, and like and subscribe and all that good shit. I'm gonna take you out with my boy Arnold.
I'm a stud. I'm ballsy. I don't take no shit from anyone. I smoke my stogie anywhere I want. I don't have to find a hideout place like you.
Thanks, guys. We'll see you next time. Take good care of yourselves.